There's a reason that John Carpenter keeps coming up seemingly every other year in this decade-long documentary, and that's because he truly is a master of the horror genre. To that end, he's one of the last of a generation of maestros that scared and scarred us through rouge-possessed cars, leper zombie pirates carried in fog banks, and shape-shifting aliens that could be anything that they wanted to appear as. In 1988, though, he would tackle something that he found even more frightening as a politically charged individual, and this was his takedown of Reaganomics. He later had to defend the message of the movie with a tweet in 2017 saying it was about yuppies and unrestrained capitalism, so that other groups couldn't claim it as their own. With a shocking debut of hitting #1 at the box office the week it came out, and a cast that was led by a WWF wrestler who had faith to leave his job and go make movies, They Live still packs a punch.
Rowdy Roddy Piper is the best lead for that film.
And is in many ways more relevant today than it was upon its initial release. Today on 80s Horror Memories, we ask that you obey our wishes, take off those pesky sunglasses, and dive into why They Live is quintessential 80s cinema.
They Live is a great indictment of consumerism, right? It's that sequence where Roddy Piper puts the glasses on for the first time and sees the real world is amazing.
After 1986's mega flop Big Trouble in Little China, yeah, that beloved 80s cheese fest masterpiece was a flop. Carpenter would switch back to straight horror with 1987's Prince of Darkness, with Larry Franco and Alive Pictures producing, and Universal picking up the distribution rights. It was a modest hit, and the very next year would see a movie from the same team. Carpenter had bought the rights to the story and comic adaptations for 8 o'clock in the morning and nada, for which he then wrote the screenplay. Between the two different types of stories and the input of other cast and crew members, he credited the script to Frank Armitage, which was his nod to H.P. Lovecraft. It's a fitting homage to someone he saw as one who writes about the hidden world, when this script heavily focuses on what the general public can't see. While the movie doesn't have any of the horrors that the famed writer used in his works, it does deal with terror that is unseen by most. My earliest memory of this movie goes back to the creators of 3D Realms, who loved action movies and wanted to create the ultimate badass character in Duke Nukem. Much like him aping the line Groovy from Evil Dead 2 when he picks up a power-up in the game, the entire third set of levels opens with the Duke flat out saying,
"It's time to kick ass and chew bubble gum, and I'm all out of gum."
Now, as a 13-year-old in my buddy Don's garage playing on a crappy home computer, I was floored. When I saw the movie on USA Network late at night on a Friday, I was also admittedly very confused. Roddy Piper said these words out of Nada's mouth before Nukem could eke them out of a lousy computer speaker, and said it with much more charm and even menace. Piper, to his credit, came up with the line himself and cleared it with Carpenter first.
We met the character of John Nada. I met him when I was going to the market after dropping the kids off at school. And I saw a dog guarding a backpack outside of Gelson's Market in the valley. And then inside I saw a guy, kind of dusty dirty, not a downtrodden guy. But he was being followed through the market by the manager and stuff, and what he was buying was dog food. And I thought, well, this is fascinating. He obviously goes with the dog outside. And I got curious about his story. And I finished up my marketing, and he was hitchhiking, getting on the Ventura Freeway. And I picked him and the dog up and drove him to where he was trying to pick up his tools up in Ventura because he had a job. And that's where I heard more about this migration of workers in construction. So essentially, it was like out of the 30s where it was agricultural workers. And now we had guys who were used to being employed in one spot with families and stuff, who instead struck out on their own. And he was telling me about the savings and loans failures and all these things in Colorado. And I came back and I said, I know who John Nada is. You know?
When discussing the movie in general, there are typically three big things to talk about: the portrayal by wrestler Roddy Piper, the fight scene, and the overall message. Wrestlers today have a cinematic flair, pun intended. Built in with how theatric professional wrestling is, but also with their superior speaking and performance skills compared to what they were in the 80s. It's hard to find a 3-month stretch that goes by in a given year that doesn't have John Cena or The Rock in a starring or supporting vehicle. This works because they hone their craft over multiple decades and have their fair share of stinkers too. While Terry Bollea, better known to the world at large as Hulk Hogan, was the big star of the wrestling world at the time and had appeared in Rocky III as the hilariously over-the-top Thunderlips, he wouldn't get his own starring video until 1989's No Holds Barred. While The Princess Bride was certainly more popular and loved by more of an audience in 1987, Andre the Giant was hardly the star, even if he is an absolute scene stealer in it. Roddy Piper was actually a replacement for Kurt Russell, who was originally cast as Nada. But both men felt that this type of story with this type of character had been done by both of them together already, while the character of Frank was specifically written for actor Keith David, after Carpenter enjoyed working with him so much on The Thing. Piper wasn't considered until the director saw him at WrestleMania 3. WrestleMania was the biggest show that the then WWF put on every year, and Carpenter was amazed by what he saw from Piper. Piper also often had a segment called Piper's Pit that would use his skills on the mic to interview fellow wrestlers, so Carpenter knew what he was capable of. While this isn't so prevalent in the early parts of the movie, and the character of Nada barely speaking more than a few words at a time, Piper, and by association Nada, really warms up by the end of the movie with crisp and clean delivered fun dialogue to go with his quippy one-liners. Piper took a chance and walked away from his career as a professional wrestler to act. After seeing Piper in They Live, I not only used my G.I. Joe action figures to recreate my own version of the movie, but I also made it my mission to seek out anything else that he did. While most of them are okay at best, the very same year he also starred in Hell Comes to Frogtown, where he plays Sam Hell. And yes, you do in fact need to see it. The second component of They Live that is quite frankly too amazing for its own good is the fight scene that has to be seen to be believed. For the first chunk of the film, we follow a quiet Nada as he looks for work, a place to stay, and a nice meal here and there, while slumming it in a them versus us and rich versus poor society. He's quiet but observes everything, and when a church fakes having people in a sermon with studio equipment and is later raided by city police, he finds a box of sunglasses that changes his perspective, to say the least. Not wanting to be alone, he tries to find his friend Frank, who sees him as a killer now. When Frank feels pity for him in an alley and gives him a week's pay, we are treated to the greatest 5 minutes and 20 seconds in film history, which is astonishing considering the scene in question was originally a 20-second throwaway scene. That's called knowing when you have gold.
They Live wins the award for me for greatest fight scene ever in a movie. It's the most realistic fight scene because it goes on forever. It's really tiresome. It's Keith David and Rowdy Roddy Piper fighting in this like alleyway parking lot forever. And they're just getting tired and they're punching and they're tired. And it was just so great. I mean, especially with Rambo in theaters around that time and the Schwarzenegger films, you're seeing all these like superhero versions of fight scenes with these big giant muscle guys. Well, to see Keith David and Rowdy Roddy Piper slugging it out in a much more realistic way was one of my favorite parts of that film. Of course, I love the aliens, but that fight scene might be my favorite thing about that movie.
It's no injustice or oversell to say that this is one of the greatest fight scenes of all time. Hell, when I was working at Blockbuster, we ended up getting in this cut-together collection of the greatest action scenes of all time on one DVD. And I remember being so proud and a little shocked when this little one-on-one brawl made the cut. The fight has everything you'd want in a fist fight. The two really look like they lay it into each other, and only when the shots are directly on the face can you tell that they're actually pulling punches. Little details like the back of Keith David's head being scraped to the progressive blood and swelling that both men acquire add to the realism of the slobber knocker. It even has little human elements, like Frank helping Nada up only to punch him again, and Nada apologizing to Frank after bashing his windshield.
I'm sorry.
My favorite is when Nada breaks out in a mid-fight laugh after Frank breaks a bottle to use, only to have it completely shatter. When the two men head to the hotel after, you can feel both the physical bruises between the two men, as well as their newly formed spiritual bond. The fight was immortalized to a whole new generation after South Park recreated it shot for shot in an episode. While elements of the movie are great on their own, it's the overall message of the movie that strikes a chord in 1988 and almost doubles down on it now in 2024. Scenes and pictures from the black and white sunglasses vision seen by protagonists such as Obey and This Is Your God have now shown up on various merchandising and art pieces. But it's the theme that permeates the entire film.
Nobody's done anything as good as that. It's ripped off and put in so many other things. People put on t-shirts, but it is an incredible piece of commentary. More than the story or anything else. That movie is the commentary of that. That and you know, I'm here to kick ass and chew bubblegum and I'm fresh out of bubblegum.
That skull face is just classic, and the glasses you need to wear to see them. Just a really fun and kind of cheesy John Carpenter film that holds a special place in my heart.
While it's a slow alien invasion that pits classes against each specifically aiming at the rich versus the poor, they not only infiltrate the police, politicians, critics, the news, and other high-ranking jobs, but also get collaborating humans to seal the deal. They make all of our advertising, magazines, newspapers, and even money a big subliminal message to control the population. They even go as far as to have sound waves spouting throughout the major cities. It's terrifying to think about, and the star wrestler turned actor swore that it was based on a real event.
John Carpenter's They Live is a hard one for me, because I don't necessarily love the movie. I think that some of the things that are done, everyone talks about the fight scene. Okay, I get it. Okay, fine. I get it. But what I love about the movie is, again, it's about something. It really is the sort of reaction to the Reagan era and how it influenced our culture and just how we are being manipulated by corporations and by media. And the way that was sort of demonstrated through the glasses, like literally lifting the veil to see the truth, and how commercialization has turned us into just generators of profit for people who are standing on our corpses and laughing with glee as we willfully, like lemmings, walk off the economic edge. That's what They Live's about. It's about us being controlled. So for that reason alone, more than any other movie in the 80s, I think it is really important because it shows how people were starting to feel in the 80s, in the Reagan, the backwash of the Reagan Revolution. So I think it'd be very interesting for people today, given the current environment, to watch They Live and see if they can see any parallels to what's happening in 2024 and 2025 and 2026 as to what was happening back in the 80s as expressed by They Live.
While not apples to apples, today's glut of social media, cell phones, and fake news on both sides of the debate create a chilling comparison to the theme of control. Everything the US and world at large has been through since the start of 2020, having a controlling, slow-moving alien invasion isn't the craziest sounding thing you've ever heard. While different groups and designers have taken the look and feel of the film and ran it through their own creative or destructive means, the movie has only become more important to society and culture through the eyes of what is real and what is hidden behind the everyday life that we try to go through daily. The movie was originally supposed to come out on October 21st, 1988, but was moved for two reasons. One was not to compete with the literal run of Michael Myers in Halloween 4: The Return of Michael Myers. This must have been a trip for Carpenter, who was either director, writer, or producer on the first three movies, and this entry would be the first with absolutely zero involvement from him. This was a great decision, as Halloween 4 not only won the box office with almost $7 million in its first week, but of course won the week of Halloween as well, with a total of $17 million at the box office. The decision to move the release of They Live 2 weeks was a brilliant move, not only to shy away from the dominating Shatner mask, but also capitalize on the very thing that the movie tried to lampoon: politics and the 1988 election.
A reaction to the 80s, a reaction to Reaganomics, a reaction to a mindset that seemed to have taken over after our altruism of the 70s, where we really thought we were making a difference. You know, protest to the Vietnam War, managed to make that in, got the 18-year-olds the right to vote. That went through. If you were going to have to be sent to war, you should have a say in it. Thought we were making civil rights movement. And then you turn around and everyone's got black BMWs with shaded windows, and they're talking on their cell phones, and they seem to have forgotten what they ever stood for. And started seeing the rise of working homeless, and that there were guys that were working construction sites and living out of their cars. And they were following the building boom that was going on in Colorado, going on in California, and yet they were homeless.
The gamble worked, and They Live shot up to number 1 at the box office in its first weekend with just south of $5 million. While it would live, pun intended, in the top 10 for a second week, it would disappear just as quickly. Fans who saw it in theaters had it stick with them until its home release, where it would have an even bigger impact.
I think They Live, like The Thing, finds its audience later, right? I think that happens to a lot of genre films. I certainly, having experienced some of that myself. You know, a little film called Drive Anger, which people found later, I hope.
While it may not be the most horror-centric of Carpenter's works, it may be the most relevant and socially important. I discovered it on TV, and it quickly became one of the movies that I would watch to completion, no matter what part I stumbled into. I watched it on Monster Vision with Joe Bob Briggs, with Piper as a guest.
4 stars, check it out.
And I've been excited to show it off to anyone and everyone who would give it a chance. They Live has done what many movies of the decade have tried and failed to do.
This is where horror, sci-fi, comics, all of these things matter. And in the 80s, they were being said regularly. And then I feel what happened now is that horror became a cash cow. And they think that horror is a subject instead of a reaction. And we should all be horrified right now.
While you can be entertaining on a good level, a so bad it's good level, or for a number of technical or special effects related reasons, few can lay claim to being just as enjoyable, but even more relevant today as they live. Oh, and having the best fight scene of all time certainly doesn't hurt. I mean, unless your name happens to be Frank or Nada.
So, See They Live, another classic John Carpenter film.
On the next episode, grab the ones you love and pack light because no one will be safe from the Blob. Until next time, gorehounds.
Hi friends, your humble narrator Tyler Nichols here, and I hope that you enjoyed that episode of 80s Horror Memories. If you missed our previous episode, click over here. If you want to see more from our series, click up here. And if you're not subscribed yet, what are you doing? Subscribe right here. And most importantly, stay spooky, folks.